If you need your help with something, I'm not able to take prayer for my father. So I'm going to ask you to take prayer on the left side. Dad, we don't see the left side. Yeah. After the prayer, we're going to make a small official. Father, okay, want to welcome everybody who's gathered here to give kavod achron to our dear Savta, Esther Tova Bas Sarah. We're going to, as this is say again, welcome everybody. Unfortunately, to give kavod achron to our Savta, Esther Tova Bas Sarah. We're going to say a few kapitlos of Tehillim. Afterwards, we'll have a few short espedim, as this is a graveside ceremony, but to give fitting kavod, honor to a great woman, great lady, great Savta, great mother, and most of all, an amazing wife. I want to honor Rabbi Wasserman to come read a kapitl of Tehillim. Aleph.
Just also want to say, for 1 second, tremendous hakaras hatov. I have my formative years in Hillel. Mrs. Rosenfeld was there teaching me Hebrew, many things that I know from, so tremendous hakaras hatov, and tremendous whatever I learn and give over, she should have a piece of that schus. אשרי האיש אשר לא ילך בעצת רשעים, בדרך חטאים לא יעמוד, ומוישב לעצים לא ישוב. כי אם בשעירת אדוני חפצוי, בשערתו יגע ימם בלילה, ויהיה כעץ שסול על פלגי מים. אשר ייתן ביטוי, ועליהו לא ייבול, וכל אשר יעשה יצליח. לכן הרשעים כי אם כמוץ אשר תדפנו רוח. על כן לא יקומו רשעים במשפט וחטאים בהדס צדיקים כי יודע אדוני דרך צדיקים ודרך רשעים אין טובת.
For the next kapitel of Tehillim, our family would like to honor Mr. Yossi Fried, a close friend of our family, to read kapitel Tesvav.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני מי יגור באוהליך, מי ישכון בהר קודשך. הולך תמים ופועל צדק, ודובר אמת בלבבו. לא רגל על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה, וחרפה לא נשא על קרבו. נבזה בעיניו נמאס, ואת יראי אדוני יכבד. נשבע להרע ולא יאמר כספו, ולא נתן בנשך, ושוחד על נקי לא לקח. עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם.
We'll read. We'll honor Mr. Fishman to read one final kapitel of Tehillim, kapitel Chaf Gimel.
I know. מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי לא אחסר, מן הדשא ירביצני, עמי ינחלני. נפשי ישובב, ינחני במרבה צדק למען שמו, גם כי אלך בבית צל מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך משענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צהרי, תשענת בשם אנושי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב החסד ירפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי לבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
We're going to have a few short tespedim at this point. I'm going to honor my father, Avi Mori, to give the first hesped. Afterwards, my brother, Rabbi Tavi Mori Rosenfeld, and following that, my brother Jacob. And finally, I will give a few short words of hesped as well.
Thank you all for coming. Those of you who are here, consider yourself lucky. My mom would have been very upset if you didn't show up. I want to thank you all for coming, for being there for the Rosenfeld family as much as, if I'm allowed to say, the Rosenfeld family has been here for every one of you. This is actually, as some of you may know, not the first time my mother is being buried. In 1944, sometime, my mother didn't remember the time, when she was a refugee in Budapest, the Nazis and the Hungarian Iron Cross lined up students from her class and some other classes, and in a drunken stupor began shooting wildly. My mother quickly realized what was happening and fell, Ilu, she was dead, behind someone else. They then realized what they had done and quickly built or dug a pit to bury everybody in, including my mother. For some reason, I'll never understand why, and my mother never knew, her mother was convinced that she was still alive. She dug her out with her hands and pulled her from under some people who had actually not been as lucky. Many years later, my parents, Zichronam Livracha, took my brother David and I to Budapest, and we stood in what's now a parking lot. And my mother said, Baruch she'asa li nisim b'makom hazeh. Blessed is the one who created a personal miracle for me in this very place. She then grabbed my hand, my brother's hand, and said, I won. I married a Rav. I served in the Israeli army. My children follow in the direction, in the path that we set out for them. My grandchildren, at the time, one of my sons was serving in the Israeli army. I'm very proud of that. She said, I won. Some 70, whatever years later, my mom wins again as she goes to her well-deserved rest next to the love of her life and someone who she continuously mourned and pined after. It's not by coincidence that this past Shabbos was my father's yahrzeit, 7th yahrzeit. And I thought about it today, and I think that for whatever reason, my mother held Yom Lashana, that each day, each year equaled a day. That's how difficult it was for my mother to lose her father, to lose her husband. Each year seemed like a day of Shiva. My mother then seemingly got up, although she didn't get up physically, and instead of walking around the block, ran to my father's arms. If you'll indulge me for just a moment, my mother's journey, I don't even want to call it a life, her journey in many ways parallels the history of 20th century Jewry. As a young girl in Vienna, Austria, living what was a very cosmopolitan life, on the day she was forced to wear the yellow star, her mother took her inside, dyed her hair blonde, and the family escaped to Budapest. Before that time, there was a small shul in the courtyard of their house in the Zweiten Bezirk in Vienna. And my mother clearly remembers Kristallnacht. She ran upstairs to bed to hide under the bed because she couldn't believe that the place where she davened and her father davened was going up in flames. Once they were in Budapest, she started a Jewish day school, started attending a Jewish day school, and all was pretty much in order until the Nazis came and dragged her father, from his bed, crushing his glasses, saying, "You're not going to need these where you go." And the next day, my mother tried to bring her father, his talis and tefillin, to the courtyard of the Dohani Shul, where they had rounded up all the Jews before their transport to Auschwitz. And that was the last she saw of him. After the war ended, my grandmother, Allah Shalom, together with my mother and her sister Zelma, who many of you know, and in many ways was the real matriarch of our family in so many ways, literally walked across what is now Yugoslavia, Greece, made it to Saloniki, where my mother spent several months, and got on a ship, if you can call it a ship. It was probably more of a rowboat that arrived at the shores of Israel one ship before the Exodus. My mother was promptly exiled to Cyprus together with her sister. And my mother literally saved her sister's life by biting a chunk of the leg off of the British soldier who was attempting to rape my aunt. When my mom finally made it back to Israel, she was chosen to be part of the first machzor of religious students in the prestigious agricultural school of Mikveh Israel. There, one of her teachers, a fellow by the name of Moshe Dayan, encouraged her to serve the country in any way that she could. My mother remembers at any time that we would go back to Yerushalayim, she would begin, gosh, I'm sorry. She would begin crying as we passed the burnt out trucks on the road, which many of us are familiar with. And my mother would say, the students from Mikveh Israel were called upon the day after the siege of Yerushalayim was broken to help bury the bodies and feed the sick, nourish them. She says, I remember when these trucks were on fire, young korbanot were being burned. She took Moshe Dayan's advice and became an integral part of the Israeli Air Force. She played a pivotal, vital role. It was top secret at the time, but now I can tell you she organized weekly parties for the pilots on the base. She was the fate of post-war Jewry, put my mother's aunt together, my mother's sister together with my father's sister in the same hospital room in Davos, Switzerland, where they conspired to have my father meet my mother on a trip to Israel. They met Matzah Shabbos, they got engaged Tuesday night, and my father had to fly back a month later to marry her because she couldn't get out of the army. My father was truly the love of my mother's life. She was devoted to him for 62 years while they were together, and for 7 while they were only together in her dreams. My brother David, he should be well, was born in New York City, where my father was teaching and began his career as an educator. He was born with severe asthma, and they were told, move to Denver or Arizona. Either place, one of them is going to be better and is going to save him. Because of the connections and the family members and friends who were convalescing at the JCRS, they chose Denver. And from that time on, another romance was born. My parents loved Denver as much as Denver loved my parents. They left their mark on Denver as much as Denver left a mark on them. My father would always say, we're simple mountain folk. We came from the mountains. I came from the mountains of Transylvania, and I ended up in the Rocky Mountains. For my mother, education was in her DNA as much as it was for my father. She was invited to lecture about her experiences and about anti-Semitism in such diverse places as a women's prison not far from here, and at the regional FBI headquarters, where she warned and admonished agents that without vigilance and without remembering the past, we are headed down a road of calamity. My mother joins my father now in being Melitzim Yesharim, who is Chus of their Bechor, who needs their intervention, and who was more devoted to his parents than any human being I've ever seen. As I told my brother yesterday on the phone, when you Google Kibud Av V'Em, the first hit comes up, David Rosenfeld. Finally, my mother had many friends, and she was always very outgoing. But in order to sustain that friendship, you had to be able to weather her caustic sense of humor, which she seems to have passed on to all of us. And as you well know, my mother had very little use for any type of a filter. She would tell you exactly how she felt, and oftentimes how you felt as well. I'd like to begin by thanking some people. I apologize in advance for those I leave out, but certain people played an important role in helping my mother survive to the point that she did. Dr. Paul Fishman is as kind a doctor and a friend as anyone could have helped, and I believe he is truly an angel sent from Shamayim. My mother had a companion for many years, Yvette Gonzalez, who was like a daughter to her. And my mother was very grateful for her companionship. Elizabeth Monahan, Orly Lissauer, the Engels, the Schottensteins, people who would come to visit my mother on a Shabbos, and I apologize off the top of my head, the Mudgeroses, the people from old Denver. I apologize. I do not mean to omit you, and I'm eternally grateful for every day of simcha that you gave to my mother, and I'm eternally grateful for every day of simcha that she was able to give back to you. Mom, of course, everybody at this point asks for mechila for anything that they may have done. It's not the case here. It's not a may. There's many things that I did wrong. I was not always here for you. I tried to set up a life outside of Denver, and I kept calling back. And in the end, Mom, all I can ask for is your indulgence and your mechila, and to understand I am who you raised. Tehi nafsho tzura b'tzar chaim.
I know that everyone is standing and that there are still 2 other speakers after me, so I promise to keep it brief. there are two things I just wanted to say that I thought of when my dad was speaking. And the first one is really that when we think of our grandparents, we think of Denver. And it was always so natural and taken for granted that Denver really loved and took care of my grandparents, both of them. And we will always be so grateful. And we wondered during this trip if, when the next time we'll be coming here is, and we'll certainly be back. And this place has just been so fundamental, foundational, and really just a source of a lot of gratitude for us. And as my dad echoed my Savta saying in that parking lot, Baruch she'asa li nisa b'makom zeh, I think that we could make a similar bracha. Baruch she'asa lanu, our family, nisa mimakom hazeh. It was from this place, from Denver, that we became who we are now, and we're always going to be, Denver rooted. Savta, I need to first express our karsa tov to Hashem for making it possible for all of us to spend the last few days together with you. It was really tricky coming in from Eretz Yisrael, and I know that you would have really rathered that we stay in Yerushalayim, but we couldn't stay away. For a good part of the day, Savta, I've been trying my best to think of cherished memories and stories to share. Really just trying to conjure up something that would do a respectable and responsible job of illustrating our relationship to everyone. But instead of specific memories, Savta, I'm left with the broader sense of you, the feeling of having such an intensely loving grandmother. And when I think of you today in Amir Tashem, may Hashem be kind to us. I think also when we're talking about you to our future children, I think of your almost feverish need to put food down in front of us, usually a lot more of it than we needed, to make sure we had what we needed in general, to make sure we knew how loved we are and special and dear we were to you and Saba. As Jacob put it so well this morning, we always felt almost like we were being drowned in your love. And Savta, I know that you would argue with me and my father here. I don't mean to upset you, but I wasn't a perfect grandson. And in the coming days, I'm going to be thinking a lot about the phone calls that I should have made, the days that I should have called, the conversations we should have had, the questions I should have asked. Instead of talking about all that now, I just want to remember with you how much I have to be grateful to you for. I will always cherish the trip that Rachel and I were able to take to Denver this past summer to introduce you to my wife and feeling your love for her like she was your own grandchild for the rest of my life. I wish I could laugh with you now at how you would insist that my Hebrew needs work. And I would tell you that I had too good of a teacher. It can't be on me, because she would spend countless hours on the phone with printed material that you would send in advance. And you were just as stern and serious as you were with all your other students, as I'm sure so many people here can attest to. But you were also just as loving. And Rachel and I are so grateful to Hashem that we merited grandparents that had such a loving relationship like you and Saba did. We'll do our best, I promise, to follow your example. I know that you would be really upset with me if I didn't mention your love of Israel. It's no mystery where our love of Israel comes from. So I'd like to conclude just by briefly sharing something, if everyone will indulge me, from Yehuda Amichai, the German Israeli poet, who I did get to speak to about with my Savta on occasion. On my desk, there is a stone with the word Amen on it. A triangular fragment of stone from a Jewish graveyard destroyed many generations ago. The other fragments, hundreds upon hundreds, were scattered helter-skelter. Only this stone lies calmly on my desk and says Amen. My Savta, you are a stone with the word Amen on it. You are a fragment from a destroyed world, but you and Saba, but you didn't stay lying on a desk. You left the destroyed world and you began anew. You planted seeds that really became mighty oaks, and it's so evident today. And you're leaving grandchildren and great-grandchildren and children who need you to keep up your undying love for us. We need you to daven for us. We need you to daven for your sons, for David Tav. Please, refuah shalema. I love you with all of my heart, Savta. I miss you, and I will do my best to continue to make you proud. As the only non-rabbi in the family, it's hard to follow up sometimes. But I did just want to share a few thoughts. I apologize if they're a bit fragmented.
just to piggyback on what Maury was saying, it's anybody who knows me knows that there's some who know me closer understand it, some who know me less know that there's some idea, but everybody relates me somehow to Denver. Oh yeah, he's a Denver fan. He's a Colorado Avalanche fan for some reason. Broncos fan for some reason. My kids have the jersey. Like, they don't really know why, but it really is such an integral part of the way that we grew up, having this place here, this home away from home that we so enjoyed coming. We love spending so much time with my grandparents. My Savta had really an incredible sense of humor, as other have said. She loved making people smile and making people comfortable, and even making people uncomfortable, like my dad was saying. She had a really good, it's such a breath of fresh air sometimes of letting people know exactly what they needed to hear, even if they didn't love to, even if it wasn't the, in the warmest way. But that was my Savta. She was 100% real. She was an incredibly special and unique person, someone that really touched upon every single important aspect of modern Jewish history, like my dad was saying. And when I tell my family and my friends and my children about her, it's a lesson in resilience and in what the Jewish people went through and accomplished and succeeded in. Jakey is what she would call me. She would call me Schwerbela, Fire Yingala. She had all sorts of endearing names, but she had a love that was so deep and was so strong, so powerful. Every time, and my Saba as well, my brothers and I felt it so strongly, that we felt that there was every single time she saw us, it was a response. It was a nitzachon to the Shoah. And there was a lot of pressure on my brothers and I that we felt, but I obviously feel, and we feel, that it's what made us who we are, and I like to think that there's a uniqueness that we carry as well, and that comes obviously directly from my Savta and from my Saba. Her love for my Saba, as my dad also mentioned, was something that was truly otherworldly, that you couldn't put it to words. The way that they would, the stories of that, on Friday nights, they would just sing Israeli songs with each other. We'd go to sleep every night singing Hatikva with each other. Just a love that was so strong. And it's a mission for myself and for my family. I speak to my wife about it a lot, that it's a model that you could just hope to reach. And we're so lucky. We feel so blessed that we were able to have that in our lives. We really do. Savta would have wanted me there was a story that I would be remiss to say, that Savta really loved this story. Whenever she came, she was back in New York once, right before my Chumash play. I guess I was in second grade, and she had shown me this little game, a kid's game that she was trying to make me laugh with. And lo and behold, obviously in the middle of the Chumash play, with all the cameras and everybody looking on, I did exactly what my Savta had showed me. I did something along those lines, and Savta was like, but every time that story came, she always liked she liked telling my kids and myself that story. Savta, you're leaving behind an incredible legacy, children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and just future generations, but also my Uncle David, Shever Refuah Shalema, and as my dad said, just the prime example of what Kibbut Avayim is. Took such good care of my grandparents. We're so grateful to him, so grateful to everybody in the community that has always been so welcoming and loving. And there's other things I wanted to say, but I love you so much, Savta. I miss you very much. Please daven for us. Please daven for everybody. I love you, Savta.
As some people know, and I'll be very brief because what more is there to really add to the words of my brothers and my father? Aval Savta, as many people who spoke to her on the phone knew, that when you spoke to her in Hebrew, a different person would come out, a different personality would emerge. You'd be drawn back to the 50s, and Akamat Hamdina, and Savta would travel back in time. Savta, boi daber b'ivrit, as you would say every Erev Shabbos. Let's speak in Hebrew. Kama shanachnu ovim otcha, how much we love you. Kama shakila zot modelach v'ohevet otach, how much this community V'amech and your people love you and owe a debt of gratitude to you. Asirei toda lach savta. Kama shelamad mimech, how much we learned from you. Kama shetzachaknu mimech, how much we laughed from you. Michusha umor selach, from your sharp sense of humor. Me'achochma, and from the life's wisdom that you had. I could say what my father said, that my Savta story is the story of 20th century Judaism, a miracle story. I could say what my brother said about the joy that my Savta took from us, from our mere presence. It's easy to be the grandchild of my Saba and Savta because our very existence was the greatest source of nachas possible. But we had planned when we were here to be able to visit my Saba. And as Shlomo Melech HaChacham Mikol Adam, King Solomon said, Eishes Chayil Ateres Ba'ala, a woman whose life is filled with alacrity and bravery and fortitude is the crown of her husband. And this isn't meant, Chalila, to make my Savta secondary to my Saba Zichron Levracha, but that she would have wanted it to be this way, and my Saba would have wanted it to be this way. And I know because I'm about to share with you exactly what my Saba felt. Additionally to that, we know that Eishes Chaver is Kechaver, that the wife of a Talmid Chacham, of an educator, of a great man, even in her own respect, was a great woman, but they do it together. My Saba writes, and I'll finish with this, and this is from the story of my Saba's life that he gave to us to read before each of our bar mitzvahs. It's not easy reading, but I asked my father permission to share this vignette. My Saba, as my dad mentioned, had been sent to bring a package with him to Eretz Yisrael. He was there for 6 weeks on vacation from being a teacher at the Westchester Day School. And my Saba describes his last day. He had forgotten, a very trait I could recognize in myself, he had forgotten to give the package to one Tova Luck, who was residing in Tel Aviv. My Saba is on the beach in Netanya, and he remembered, I'm not going to be able to deliver that package before I return to New York. So he wrote a postcard in his mellifluous Hebrew to Tova Luck. And hopefully she'd be able to pick it up from Kfar Saba. The last Friday of my visit arrived, says my Saba. I was on my way back to New York. I decided to spend one more day or part of it at the beach in Netanya, this time by myself. I took my camera, my tourist tote, I put on my shorts and I was off to the beach. Towards the middle of the afternoon or so, I took the bus back to Kfar Saba, sad that the first real vacation is all but over. As I started to walk away from the bus station, deep in thought, I heard what sounded like a lady's voice calling, Mr. Schoenfeld, Mr. Schoenfeld. I turned around, and the most beautiful young lady in all of creation, with a smile on her gorgeous face, was waving a hand to me. I stopped in my tracks. When she came near enough for me to fully appreciate her beauty and bubbly personality, not to mention her great figure, I told her in Hebrew that I was very sorry, but my name was not Schoenfeld, but I really wished it was. She insisted that she meant to call me by my name, but for the moment did not remember it. But Schoenfeld sounded close enough. She produced the postcard from her purse and asked me if I was the one who wrote that. She couldn't believe that the American tourist could write in such good Hebrew. She introduced herself as Tova Luck, Selma's sister. She'd already been at the Shakets and retrieved the package. I asked her. She had a few minutes to grab a cup of coffee with me in a nearby kiosk. We sat down at a table to enjoy our coffee and cake, and we enjoyed each other's company much more than the food and drink. We could not believe how many things we had in common, beside the fact that our two sisters were best friends. Later, I found out that it was all a plot cooked up by our two sisters in Denver to bring us together, and it worked. We were both survivors. We both spoke Hebrew and Hungarian, and we had both lost our fathers in the Holocaust. We started talking about our backgrounds and traditions from home. We really had a very similar outlook on what is important. We were quoting whole passages from Tanakh to impress each other. For the first time in my life, I began to seriously consider marriage and to settle down and to raise a family. I was now at the same age as my father when he got married. Not that this was any importance at all, but just a push in the right direction. There's more to this beautiful love story here, but that family is before you. Those students are before you. I believe a grateful city is before you, and a grateful Am Yisrael is before you. And I know that this is also a time to ask Mechila. The last 2 years haven't made travel so easy. Try to speak soft. כמה שאנחנו אוהבים אותך, כמה שאנחנו מעריכים אותך. דין ליצת יושר לפני אדון כל. שפק הקדוש ברוך הוא for a slave of the David and Esther Tova. בסוך שער חול לישראל. You should go and should be together with Saba once more. Gan Eden. We're going to continue now with the burial. I'm going to ask my brothers, myself, I'll ask one more person to help lower. We'll lower it afterwards. Just the Seder Hadvarim. We're going to say Tziduk Adin, acceptance of God's judgment. Following Tziduk Adin, we're going to hear Kaddish after the burial. After that, a Kel Malay and a final Kaddish. Then we will exit the cemetery while offering words, the first words of comfort to my father, and to have in mind my Uncle David, who cannot be here, but of course is here together with us from just a few miles away. Yeah. Don't wrap your hands. Just lifting the 24. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Lift just a little bit. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Or your side. As is the custom for anybody that is participating in the mitzvah of Kipura. So the first shovel that we'll do will be from the back of the shovel. The custom is the minhag is to not hand the shovel from hand to hand. And after we make a tzurat HaKever, the shape of a grave, we will recite Tziduk Hadin on behalf of my father and my Uncle David. Yes. Yeah. 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 Come on, is after to the academic Kaddish. Say it for you and Uncle David. I'll put this here. It's like a focage, it just doesn't have to stop. How do you do that time in terms of saying?
Yeah.
You have time. Very secure. I'll make sure that just a little bit more we haven't seen. As we make Tzuras HaKever and want to say that we're also going to have a mincha, so that my father can sit a part of the day near Tashetin at the entrance after we complete this service. I'm going to recite Tzedek Adid on behalf of my father and my uncle David, can't be here. And following that, we'll have the Grace Side Kaddish, followed by a Kel Malay and a final mourner's Kaddish. Atzur Tamim Palo Ki Kol Terach Av Tishpat Elimunu V'Einav El Tzadik V'Yashiru. Atzur Tamim B'Chol Pam Yoymar Lo Matifal. Shalit B'Matim V'Mal V'Mis L'Chayim B'Yishol Yal. Atzur Tamim B'Chol Masim Yonei Lav Matase Ha'Omer V'Oyse Chesed Chilam Lanisase. V'V'Schos HaNekot Keseh Akshiva V'Asei. Tzadik B'Chol Drakav Atzur Tamim Erech HaChayim Alei Rachmich. V'Nefechusta Alav V'Shiponim. Ki L'cha Adon Aslichos Barachmim Tzadik Ato Adonai. Slach yes shabiot kapitoy kolur khos khalil khos khalis khos khalim khos Vinach nech berachim alin bekuchos kinachot and arachim naslichos. Adam den shon yichya wal shon yichya magistrolo. Kla yiber baruch dayna emes meis mechaye baruch chuki emes dino. Umshayt da kol vein umshalim da adn khashbon vidin fa kol shmay hodaya yitenu. Yadan wat na git sadik mishpatecha titzach tbrach tiskem shpasach vein hayrach midosh patecha. Tzadikot wat na yosh mishpatecha dayn emes shayt tzadik ve emes baruch dayna emes. Shekom mishpat tzadik emes nefesh kol chay yadecha. Tzedek mali minach yadecha rach ma pleitas tzayn yadecha v'sayim adavalach heref yadecha. Gadol eitz v'ravalila asher inech kuchos akol darchiv ne'adam lasis nish kidracha v'skifri ma'alalav lahagi ki yosher hadoyn itzurich lo'asaboy Adonai nasan v'Adonai makach yehi shem Adonai mevoyrach dehurachum yichaper avon v'lo yashchit v'hirba lahashiv ato v'lo ya'ir kol chamaso. Yeah, hold on 1 second. Hold on. Amen.
Ba'agala v'zman karev yimromei.
Amen.
Skora, Stabach, Spor, Sharma, Mustasa. Sadar, Visala, Visala, Shmei, Kutshabri, Elam, and Kulver Kosa, Shirasa, Kosa, Nakamasa, Miram, Bialma, Vibrome.
Amen.
Shlama, Rabba, Vishamaya, Chaim Alena, Balto Israel, Vibrome.
Amen.
Say Shalom, Vibroma, Yas Shalom Alena, Balto Israel, Vibrome.
Amen. Honor Rabbi Schwab with Kel Malay.
Malay Rachamim Shoichei Mamronim Kansei Minuchanu Chayna Kansei Ashchina B'malois Kedoshim Utarim Kisayar Rokia Mazirim Es Nishmas Esther Tova Bas Meir Shalchaloi Lama Bavur Shibli Neder Mishpocha Tain Tzedakah Askos Nishmasa Begade den tem no khoso no khaim balarachamim misterel beseisek no favloy lamim bitzra khayim es nismaso adonai hu nachaloso besanuch beshalom amishkavo v'nemaharomei.
After one final mourner's Kaddish, I'm going to ask everybody to form a shura, 2 lines on the way towards the road and even beyond it, due to the people here, and we'll offer the first tanchum and the first comfort to my father.
Barak, Stabach, Spar, Visraima, Mistase, Visadar, Visaleh, Visalal, Shmei, Kudusha, Barichu. Elam, Mikol, Kosa, Vishirasa, Tushkosa, Berkamasa, Zahir, Bialma, Vibrome.
Amen.
Shlama, Rabba, Vishimai, Chaim, Elena, Vako, Israel, Vibrome.
Amen.
This is Shalom, Vibrama, Viyansa, Shalom, Elena, Vako, Israel, Vibrome.
Amen. We'll form a shura. We'll begin over here. Form 2 lines.
Thank you. Oh, thanks.
Take care now.
So I can't stand the Shabbos morning, make sure my parents are staying with Shabbos. I come in on Tuesday. So my second time. Well, I have to. This is open. I'm not open time, so I'm going to say he's getting something.